I might need a few minutes, if you don't mind, just to remove the video out of my presentation. Sorry, Shani, I felt for you up here. I really did. I'm very cognizant of the fact that the next section after I'm up here is lunch. So I intend to keep it moderately short so that we can all disappear and get pup and flesh straight afterwards. One of the key points that's sitting with me at the moment is understanding the smorgasbord that's been delivered to us in the last 4 hours that we've been listening. It's quite obvious that there is no one simple answer to leadership and the best way to take leadership forward. I always keep thinking about the smorgasbord as it's about situations, it's about economies, it's about the times you're in, it's about the type of leader you're in. But what I really want to focus on in this section now is about the organizational leadership. We've looked a lot at it from the macro scale. We've looked at it from the individual scale. What sort of leadership is applicable now in the organization at the moment? And I want to frame this first by recapping on something. There are many different views on the economic climate at the moment, and it depends on who you speak to. It varies from proud optimism to it's going to be okay, this is not going to hurt us that much, to there is a tsunami coming, an economic tsunami, and right now the water is being sucked out of the bay. We're sitting on the beach thinking that everything's all right. We just can't see the wave yet. And it depends on where you're at in your own head. I'm not sure that there's an answer on it. What I want to do, if I may, is talk a bit about, within that context, within that current economic climate, understanding so much diverse thinking out there. Do I put my own slides up here? Are you going to do that? Thanks so much. In the context of the current economic climate and where we're at the moment, there's a lot about personal mastery in leadership. People developing the individual skills to be able to deliver. Thanks very much. And I'll see it up there soon. Excellent. We've got a lack of alignment happening here. People are spending a lot of time in the personal mastery space. So people spending within leadership, looking inward, that mirror that we were hearing about a little earlier. People going on development programs, people really doing everything that they can to be able to grow as individual leaders. The question, though, that's posed is in the current economic climate, and perhaps always, perhaps not only in the current economic climate, should the leader not be taking counsel from the community they serve as the primary source of their leadership wisdom? When a leader turns around and says, right, I've had an idea, here's what we're going to do, is that fundamentally better than a leader who turns around and says, all right, community, what is it that you want done, takes that counsel and then delivers what the community does? That's a very tough question, and unfortunately there's no simple answer. So what we did is we took that question on the road. Our group CEO, we're fortunate to be represented in 4 continents. One of them wasn't represented here. But our group CEO went on the road recently, about 6 weeks ago. He met with about 60 leaders from varying size organizations, very large organizations down to some of the small to medium. In the UAE, he then went on to the UK, and he went on from there to Australia. I must pause on this because when our group CEO left, the economic climate that we were hearing about in Dubai and the UAE wasn't tumultuous. It wasn't terrible. When he got there, they announced some of the worst financial results that they'd had in a very long time. There was big drama. While he was there, the UK was actually quite okay. And he left Dubai to travel to the UK and took with him the worst snowstorms in history. So he's now in the UK, in front of the worst snowstorms in history, and he was leaving from there to Australia. And as he leaves the UK, they have the worst fires and floods in Australia in history. There were many of us in the company who phoned him and said, "Stay there, don't come back to South Africa." We thought he was going to bring a plague of locusts with him. But he sat down in an African format with a Lekgotla. It's a tool that we use predominantly. In a Lekgotla, we frame a question to leaders and we allow every voice to say their opinion, to say what they think. And he gathered these leaders down in the UAE, in the UK, and in Australia, and framed this question that you see behind. Given the current economic climate, given whatever your perspective is on the current economic climate, what are the key strategic responses that we should expect from leaders right now? He took the pain away and said to them, in your organization, assuming you were handing over leadership to somebody else, so that it wasn't about a theory, it was very much about my organization or what my organization needs to do. Now, the final bit of framing to do here before I give you the feedback of these four, which we believe are really insightful for leaders across the world, is to understand the different mindset of the leaders. In Dubai, the leaders were literally sitting there wide-eyed. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody who's had a really terrible fright, and they've got almost their hair standing on end and their eyes are bulging. That was kind of the leaders in Dubai. And the main reason was they really believed they were not going to be hit. They believed they were okay. They believed they were positioned okay not to be nailed by this economic tsunami. And they'd just been nailed. And they'd been nailed quite hard. For those of you who are following what's happening over in the United Arab Emirates, and particularly Dubai, they'd really been hit, and it came swift, it came fast, and it hit them hard. They had hair standing on end, big bulgy eyes. When he went to the UK, though, the leaders, there was a different mindset in the UK. There was almost a gloominess of acceptance. The UK leaders were kind of going, the axing is happening, a lot of it has happened already, there's probably more coming, but it was a gloomy kind of acceptance. What's interesting is when he engaged in the leaders in Australia and in South Africa, there was a similar sentiment, almost denial. And that's not a river in Egypt. That is a whole bunch of people saying, if we're positive enough, this is not going to happen. If we believe enough as a community, this is not going to happen. Now, this is not to tell you it is going to happen or not going to happen. I believe a lot of that lies in our own hands. But what it does do is frame the feedback that we get. And the feedback came in 4 answers. The first answer that was communal amongst every place was, right now is the time for leadership. And there were a couple of key findings that were accepted by everybody about what does leadership actually mean. What are they looking for? And the first one is bring it back to basic values and fundamentals. Every one of these organizations, over 60 organizations, said we need to come back to values and fundamentals. One of the key things that came out is people said, we've got our values, we've got our vision, we've got our strategy. It might be time to pull them out of that drawer, dust them off, and bring them to life in the organization. The acid test of values is to walk out to a janitor or a supervisor who's working out in the field and say to them, what are the values of the organization? And when he can say it to you as if he understands the contribution he makes to those values, then you know you've nailed it. But how do you do that? And we'll talk about and explore that in a second. The second part that they said around leadership is that there are 2 questions that now need to sit alongside each other. In the past, we've been riding this wave. We can call it the pre-tsunami. And the question was, hey guys, what do we do? What do we do? It was all about operational strategy alignment, making sure that we're in place. There's another question, though, that now needs to sit alongside that, is the findings from these 60 leaders. They said, who are we needs to be as strong as what do we do?